This was originally a one-person podcast. Ended up bringing it to my buddies with me. We had a really good run as a 3-team podcast, but sometimes life gets in the way and we had to go different directions. So it is now back to a one-person podcast. Kind of the cool thing about this show, it's generally pretty wrestling-centric, sports-centric. Those are the two things I'm probably the most passionate about. And I think through social media, you can find a lot of people that have some of the same common interests. So it makes it pretty interesting and fun to have good conversations and interact online when you get to meet a bunch of people you never would have met before. Some good, some bad, but I try to bring the good people on, have a good conversation about pro wrestling. You can find now all 80 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast. It is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play Music, pretty much anywhere you get podcasts. That's where this podcast will be. Subscribe, rate, review, leave a 5-star rating on there. We greatly appreciate that. The podcast is also located on NoCoastBias.com. Shout out to Derek Hernandez. He also houses all the different wrestling writings that I do from time and again. Every now and again, I'll get a hair up my ass and I want to do a little bit of writing when it comes to wrestling. So Derek's always very gracious to give me that home to post my thoughts. And then also everything I write about the Sacramento Kings, my favorite basketball team, my hometown team, I will write at a Royal Pain. Thanks to Rafe and Jonathan for rolling that site down through Fansided. But this week's going to be a pretty fun show. A lot going on in the world of professional wrestling. A lot has happened lately in pro wrestling, mainly WWE, All In, and with New Japan. So what I'd like to do is bring on Brian Waters from the Wrestling Realm podcast, and let's do a little bit of talking about it. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, man? I'm glad to be here. I'm very honored. I appreciate you having me on here. Hopefully I don't get kicked off. I heard you say you was a Sacramento Kings fan.
Lifelong, my entire life, man.
Oh, man. So, I'll say this. I always have respect for the Kings. They're always fun to play with. But I'm not sure if I'm really supposed to say that because by me making that statement, you can probably guess who's my team.
I'm going to go with, because we only really have ever had one rival, so I'm going to say the Lakers.
You know it, man.
You know what? It's I'm a firm believer that the better team won each one of those finals. I don't buy into the whole ref conspiracy, mainly one, because it happened 20 years ago. And two, I'm a firm believer that even if the refs are out there trying to do what they do, the refs didn't stop Doug Christie from airballing a 3. The refs didn't stop Chris Webber from disappearing in game 6 and 7. And the Kings still had an opportunity to win game 7 and they didn't do it. So winners win those kind of games. I know it's a pretty simple philosophy I have, but I'm not one of those Kings zealots that 20 years later still hate the Lakers. You guys are, and for the most part, a well-run franchise. Believe it or not, Rajon Rondo is my favorite player in the NBA.
Okay.
So any team he's on, I'm always going to check for them. I did it when he was in Sacramento, Dallas, Chicago, and all that. So I wish you guys well. I have you guys in my non-official, official predictions. I have you guys taking the Warriors to 6 in the Western Conference Finals this year.
That's awesome, man. You know how it is when it could be when your team, it just felt like they can't get over the hump. And, by me being an Orioles fan, so I know what it's like to have a team struggle.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we back into those days. But, these past few years as a Lakers fan, it's like, oh, man, but, it's exciting. But, of course, it's not as exciting as professional wrestling. But that's just my personal preference.
I would say as much as I think Camden Yards is beautiful, it's one of the ballparks. It's definitely a bucket list ballpark for me. I think they finished, 61 games out of first this year or something like that. I heard that recently on the Levitar show. So,
everything that went wrong. And definitely if you come through, man, we definitely got to link up so you can get a crab cake here. Absolutely,
man. You got the Orioles. I got the Kings. I don't say either one of those teams are bad. I just say that we're talently deficient here in Sacramento. We lack the basketball making ability to be a good basketball team. So, one of these days, I hope.
Yeah, we'll see.
The Wrestling Realm, man, where is it? What is it? I know you do it with Dwayne Allen, but for someone who hasn't heard the podcast, what do you guys like to cover? Where can they follow you on social media, and where can they check out the podcast?
Cool. Yeah. So the Wrestling Realm, man, actually started in 2011. The real Dwayne Allen and I. So actually, I got to give you the backstory. So I had a show with my cousin. It was called Wrestle Talk with Bear and B-Dub. He was Bear. I was B-Dub. And during the show, you know, we did some cool stuff. We had a YouTube channel. It was just YouTube based, mind you. This is 2010 when my cousin and I had our show. But unfortunately, like you were saying earlier, like life happens. My cousin really couldn't do the show. And it was like just as we was hitting our stride, man, he kind of like life happened. So we couldn't do it. So I was doing like different like stuff by myself on the channel, just trying to keep the momentum going. And around this time, I'm starting to kind of make some going to like some of the local indie shows, starting to make a name for myself, you know, just as a blogger. And went to school, and there was one day, my friend Danny, she was talking about, oh yeah, they got this. He has a show, and I was like, chill, we don't got to talk about that right now. She said, no, he got his own wrestling show. So there's Dwayne in the row behind me is a TV studio class, and he says, oh, I know that. Yeah, he says nothing wrong with that. And I said, oh, you're a wrestling fan? He said, yeah, man. Gave him a business card. He checked out the show. Every day we started talking wrestling. I remember telling my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I said, I found my new co-host. She's like, are you sure? You can't replace your cousin. I said, no, I'm telling you, this guy's it. And we sat down, had a couple meetings. That was 2011. That July, we launched the Wrestling Realm. And it was, you know, it's just strictly YouTube based. Our thing was just, we were two wrestling fans. It started off as two wrestling fans who wanted to wrestle, but really couldn't because I have scoliosis and he said he was too tall and skinny, or too skinny. But the more and more we did it, we really created a niche where we just started just talking about timeless material. So we have in our earlier days, we talked about like, you know, I'm sure you remember when TNA had this thing called Wrestling Matters. So we did a show about why wrestling matters. No, we did Character Matters. I'm sorry. So why it was important for wrestlers to have characters. So that's the way the channel started. At first we was going off of the old Bear and B-Dub channel. It's like, man, we started getting momentum. We got to get our own. Then afterwards, you know, so that continued for about 3 years, just like I said, strictly YouTube based. Then I moved to Connecticut to work at ESPN right after undergrad. And during my time there, it was like, man, it's kind of hard to do the show. But, you know, we kept the brand alive, but just doing different things online. During that time, Dwayne changed the logos, trying to change the look, gave it a facelift. And then we would do like joint appearances on different shows together, which led to when we came back, we did like the NWO spoof. Unfortunately, we're in that rut right now where life is kind of getting in the way for us to do the joint shows together the way we like. But hopefully we're looking at kind of getting things back on track. So what I started doing, because I like talking wrestling, I told, I said, well, I'm going to create the Break It Down with Brian H podcast, which airs it usually drops every Wednesday. I did start doing 2 shows per week. So I started doing that. And I haven't had, there have been times where I'm like, man, I should get the real Dwayne Allen on here. But, you know, just like I said, life, there are some things coming up. Like we have a set of shows ran on a rundown. So I can't wait till we actually can get there to do it. But, you know, the Wrestling Realm, the full show with the 2 of us is available on YouTube with some segments on Instagram at Wrestling Realm, Realm being spelled with a WREALM. But we do have some stuff on like my show, the Break It Down podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Podbean.
So how did you get into wrestling? It's always something I find to be interesting when you talk to people that have been lifelong wrestling fans that have transitioned into adulthood and still staying with it. But what are your earliest memories of being a wrestling fan?
Man, so I'll give you the backstory, and I'll probably give you my first memory. The backstory was that my mother was pregnant with me, and she was on bed rest. And you know, I'm born in 1986, so I'm born August 86. So around say June 86, she was watching wrestling. My grandfather, my father, my uncles, they would leave wrestling on the television. You know, back then everybody didn't have TVs with remotes. Mm-hmm. So she couldn't change the channel, and she just got hooked. And next thing you know, she was enjoying it, you know, became a huge fan of Hulk Hogan and whatnot. That would lead to her you know, as time got closer, she said every time Vince McMahon came on and said, "Welcome to the World Wrestling Federation," I would start kicking. That was the signal that let her know I was going to be a boy. You know, this is the day before gender reveal parties and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that let her know, oh, this is a boy, definitely a boy. That would then so after that happened, when I came along, my first real memory, because they always had it on, and then I later found out my mother was like, yeah, me and your uncles used to go to the show. I would leave you with your grandmother. I didn't go to my first show till I was 18, because by then my parents had kind of fell out of it, but I pretty much stayed with it. But my first memory that I can kind of vividly remember is WrestleMania 6. Leading up to it, I remember my grandfather was had a second service at church that day, and my dad was like, all right, you ready to go home? I said, I'm supposed to go with grandpa. She was like, no, I think you're coming home with me. So my grandfather was like, no, he coming with me. So I sat, this is when you could sit in the front seat, even at 3.5 years old. And, I sat down, and I remember somebody was coming, was like, hey, we're going to your house? He said, yeah, we're going to wrestling. You know, Hogan and Warrior faced each other. One was running this way to the rope, the other was running that way to the rope. And I was just remembered like him just explaining that. And then, you know, sitting there watching wrestling. I just remember it being like it felt like all the church was in there that night watching WrestleMania, man.
Yeah, WrestleMania 6 was always it's one of my early memories too, because I'm 34. It's
okay.
It's odd to say this, like I'm almost in my mid-30s. I pretty much am now.
I know, right?
But like I remember WrestleMania 6. I remember Saturday night's main events were always a big deal because they were so rare. I think, you know, my memories back then is there wasn't as much wrestling, or obviously it wasn't readily available as it is in 2018. So when you got it, it was definitely appointment viewing, like Saturday night's main event. We got NWA on TBS, would later turn into WCW. So we'd watch like the Saturday night, the 605 back east, 305 in California. So I remember watching that with my dad a lot. And then I remember going to the video store, and I loved WrestleMania 4, the tournament edition, because it was 2 video cassettes. So I thought it was so cool that you would get 2 video cassettes for the price of one, and it was such a long show. And it was the tournament that Savage ended up winning when he wrestled DiBiase, and that was one of the ones that I really remember watching that a lot as a kid. And then, yeah, 6 was definitely one that, as I got older and kind of understood a little bit more of what I'm watching, you understand sort of how big of a deal it was at the time, where Hogan was going to lose clean to the Warrior. And I remember that crisscross spot too. I remember that whole spot. I remember thinking it was really cool that those guys would come out on like the motorized carts and the pyro. Just how many people were there to watch wrestling. It was a really special show, WrestleMania 6.
Yeah, man. You know, and unfortunately, that was the last WrestleMania I watched with my grandfather. He passed away that January, but I remember him getting me the WrestleMania Challenge video game. You know, and I think that was like the last Christmas gift he got me. And I remember just sitting there, him in like his sick bed at the house watching me play it, you know, just that. And I remember, you know, my uncle who if you look on like, I think it's, you know, I think it might have been on another channel, but he was the one who kind of like drilled the wrestling part into me. And he's 11 years older than me. He took me to my first show in 2004. But, you know, growing up, he had like one of the belts that you would get from the magazines. Whenever I would go over to my grandmother's house when he was still living there, he would cut my hair every other Saturday. And, you know, Saturday, 6:05, that was Saturday night. So I would be getting my haircut while watching wrestling. Or if it was a very rare occasion when I went on a Saturday morning, he was the one who, you know, I would get my hair cut while WWF Superstars was on, or WCW Worldwide, man. And one of the things you touched on with it not being readily available is you hit that right on the head, because like with my son, he's 8. He likes wrestling. Sometimes I'd be joking with him. I said, man, you ain't no real wrestling fan. I said, because anytime he's like on his tablet or his Nintendo Switch, he'll watch cartoons and stuff. And the wrestler's just like, he'll watch it. Then he'll ask me if he see me watching something when he's not punished. He'll see me say, he's like, oh, well, what's going on? I said, this person, that person, yada, yada. Now, when the shows come here, he wants to go, but it's different because he doesn't watch it like it's not an appointment for them. You know what I mean? Where because they got it so easily, they just like, they'll catch it when they can. Where for us, we planned our day. We went to the we knew Saturdays. We got up, we ate our cereal, ate our breakfast, and watched wrestling. And
that even transitioned into being a teenager, because Monday nights forever those were wrestling nights. Like you had to be home by, I think Raw, I think they both shows started at 8 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. But you had to be home to watch what happened on Raw or Nitro, because you had to worry about then if you missed them, you'd have to like log on to America Online, assuming that your phone line was free. So there wasn't like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram where you could catch the GIFs from the show, or get on the wrestling websites. Like some of those weren't readily as available as they are now. It is interesting to see like how much that has changed, because you think of watching wrestling just this week coming. You've got the 4-hour show that happened in Australia. You've got the 3-hour show on Raw. You've got a 2-hour SmackDown. You've got a 1-hour NXT. You've got a 1-hour 205 Live. And I don't know about you, but like I sat through just recently, I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. I just sat through the game, and that was 3 hours. And it watching 3 hours of anything nowadays seems so much like a chore that it's not a point of view. You can watch these shows in spurts. Like you can watch 45 minutes of Raw, fast forward through some commercials, or if you don't want to watch a bad match. But back then, you were invested in every single product, because if you couldn't, you could tape Nitro on like a blank tape, but the reality is you probably weren't going to go back and rewatch a VHS. There was so much effort that went into it. But now, you can stream Raw on your phone if you do it right.
Yeah, and it's one of the things you touched on was the back in the day where you trying to figure out which one, when you're saying like you would tape an episode and just having to be there. And I hate to be one that says, oh, well, they don't book this or they don't book like that, because not that I've ever booked a show, but I know it's a lot that goes into it. But because there was competition, you couldn't afford to miss nothing. And even now, if you go back and watch some of those episodes of Monday Night Raw from '98, you're really like, wow, every one of those stories mattered. And it was hard to flip the channel unless, like you said, it was just like, but what was going on in WCW? And for me, I didn't have cable during the height of the Attitude Era. So the way I got what happened was going to school on Tuesday, finding like one of my best friends, shout out to my best friend Hugh, like what happened on Raw. And if he was able to watch it, I got the rundown, or I probably asked like 3 or 4 people. And that was our conversation. And then especially when SmackDown came out, now I could talk about those because I had here in Baltimore, it aired on UPN, which is Channel 24. So you could watch SmackDown on regular TV. So that was our Friday talking wrestling, but it was the thing where you had to be there. And thankfully, my grandmother started in December 98. She started recording all of the episodes of Monday Night Raw for me. So I never missed it.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I've realized, and I think I've gotten this more with the advent of the network, to where I think, WWE, to me, their business product, the way they present it has changed. And I think it has a lot to do with the network. And what I mean by that is, when we were in our teens, or even in our 20s, or even, say, for example, WrestleMania 29, the WrestleMania before the network really blew, each month WWE was focused on having to sell you on spending $30, $40, $50 on a monthly basis to pay for 3 hours of programming. So I think that's where, you had the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era, and even, a bit of WrestleMania like 23 to 29, to where each episode felt like it was a sales job to get you to spend $50 in a month to buy that pay-per-view. And I think now, as long as you have the network, you get all of this content, which, I hope no one ever listens to this part that controls the cost of it. But for $9.99 a month, you get access to everything WWE either has done or is doing or has ever done. So you take a show like the Super Showdown. I think if you'd asked me if I was going to spend $60 on that to buy it as a one-time pay-per-view, probably not. But because it's on the network, I can watch that whenever I choose. So I think that changes the strategy of the Raws leading up to it, where they don't have to present a story that we see the value in spending $60 a month on. They just have to present a simple enough story to get us to want to stay on the network. And I think that's where a lot of stuff has changed, where they're not presenting their product as a sales pitch anymore. It's something where like, hey, if you like Raw, cool. If you don't like Raw, you're probably going to end up watching, Great Balls of Fire or Extreme Rules on the network anyway.
Yeah, you got a good point there, man. I never even put it together like that. The constant sales job each and every week.
Yeah, and I think that was the difference, because if you look at like the Austin feuds with The Rock or Triple H or with Mankind, they were all designed to have like a climax. That everything was working towards something. And I think now, especially with the way they present Raw or SmackDown, you don't have as many stories that are working towards something. You have a lot of people that are treading water, and I don't know if it necessarily hurts the product, because they don't really have to sell as much. I think the WWE brand is strong enough as it is, but it is interesting to see how different the way they present it is to how it used to be.
Yeah, and I think for me that can be some of the frustration, because me personally, I like that's the reason why I watch wrestling. I'm not a big UFC guy. One of the reasons I tell people is because I don't know why they're fighting. Like I don't care, you know. Wrestling has always been now. Because I'm not gonna be one of the people say I watch Olympic wrestling, because I really don't. If it's on, I'll look at it. I think I do. I respect what they do. I respect the technicians. But when you're in like a WWE, the square circle, as they say, I'll take a look at matches where we just want to see good wrestling. But at the end of the day, it's their character that would made me watch and care what they do in the ring.
Absolutely. Now, were there any wrestlers as a kid or even as an adult that you sort of gravitated to from a character standpoint that you really had more of a connection to with others? I know some people, they'll point to, CM Punk, or they'll point to Bret Hart or The Rock, that, they had a different level of equity built into. Did you have any as a kid that you were really tied to?
So it was, Hogan and Savage growing up. I think just because that's what everybody in the family was, who the family liked. When you're a kid, you like all the good guys and bad guys. But then I think the wrestler that made me like really a fan of his, meaning it didn't matter what he do, I was going to be a fan, was Bret Hart. I think he was the first person. Yeah, when Hogan went to WCW, I was a fan. And when he became a member of the NWO, I was still a fan. But there was times where I might have rooted against him because I wanted to see like Sting win the title or something like that. But it was Bret Hart, where even leading up to WrestleMania 12, I didn't care. I wanted Bret to win the title. I remember coming to school the next day, I was upset. Like, oh man, Shawn Michaels beat him. Looking back at it, we all knew Shawn Michaels was going to beat him. But, I was one of the people that I would not, be honest with you, I would not accept the fact that wrestling was predetermined until I was 14. So we're talking like 99, maybe 99 into 2000. But actually 2000 was around the time. But other than that, I just but Bret was the guy. Like when Bret turned on in the United States, and him and Owen, like that's one of my favorite stories. That moment right there. Look what they done to you and me. I was like, all right, I'm all the way. Hart Foundation. So yeah, it was definitely Bret Hart.
Yeah, Bret was one of the guys for me that I think watching him live, I didn't necessarily get the same impression that I did after he retired. So what I mean by that is, I'm a firm believer that the match he had with Davey Boy at SummerSlam was the match that changed the direction of WWE. It got it out of the big man territory. It got out of the Hulk Hogan's, the Ultimate Warriors. Like, it stopped making that stuff interesting and started having more of a design, more of like a definition of great technical wrestling. And that led to the era of like Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels, and, Diesel, even being 7 foot, was still capable of putting on a very good match at the time. And I think as a 34-year-old, I can look at that match as pivotal to how wrestling sort of changed its direction. But I think in 1992 or 92, 93, 94, when Bret was really having that main event run, I don't think it really resonated as much. But I'm in the same boat as you. To me, Bret is my favorite wrestler of all time. I equate it to this, to where, to me, I think Jerry Rice is the best receiver of all time. However, Randy Moss is my favorite.
Okay.
Now, I don't know, I don't really have a one wrestler that I consider to be the best of all time, but I will always consider Bret to be my favorite. Like, I thought his book, My Life in the Cartoon Shadows of Wrestling, I think is one of the best wrestling books ever. Like, I've met him twice. Both times as a fully functional, sober adult, I couldn't put a sentence together. I met him and it was just incredible. Yeah, I think his story is really interesting. Everything he's had to endure in wrestling, The way that it ended with the screw job and then the kick from Goldberg was tough, but you know, watching it as I got older definitely gave me a different appreciation for what it is that he did. And I think it was really hard to get that in real time as a 12-year-old, because I was like you, I didn't really get that wrestling was predetermined or they were telling a larger story until I was probably in middle school to high school. I think that's when I had more access to like the internet. You can kind of read some of the wrestling news sites, and that to me, if anything else, that to me kept me as a fan, because then I wanted to figure out what every little move meant, and I tried to put it together in my mind to where like one kick from Triple H to The Rock was trying to tell this story, and I thought that was really what made wrestling interesting and still continues to make wrestling interesting. And now that I'm 34 years old.
Yeah, man, and wow, like that's amazing. Because I'm the same way as far as like Bret Hart. So for me, it was Hogan Bret up until 2014. I'll explain why. But yeah, 2013, it was Hogan Bret, my favorite wrestlers. And people say, well, you know, they're obviously two completely different guys. Like, it burns me up that they don't like each other, because it's like Hogan was the guy who got me there and made me a fan from a child. Bret made me appreciate it. Bret was the technician. Like, even so, when the Montreal screw job happened, that was a weird period for me, only because we got rid of cable in June of '97. I didn't realize Shotgun Saturday Night came on until June of '98. So all that time, I didn't see anything on wrestling. The most I would see is like I had these, I call them the famous 4 tapes: WrestleMania 9, WrestleMania 11, Survivor Series 95, and King of the Ring. No, was it? Yeah, it was King of the Ring 95. I had all of those VHSs, so I watched those over and over again throughout that period. I would come home from school, watch wrestling. This is also a time I was like getting really heavy into sports. So when I discovered Shotgun Saturday Night, like I was kicking myself. I was like, man, I forgot this came. They introduced this a year ago. Like, I missed all this wrestling. So, you go back and you look, and I'm saying, I will argue till the day I die that Bret Hart would not have showed up to WCW with that title. Everybody would say, you don't know. I just believe the traditionalist in him, the respect for the business, and the respect for Vince McMahon. There was no amount of money Ted Turner could have paid Bret Hart to show up to WCW with his world championship. And I could be wrong, but I argue that with Shawn Michaels fans all the time. And I don't know if you heard Bruce Pritchard's episode where he talked about, it was one of the episodes, he said, we always talk about the screw job and this, that, and other. He said, do y'all ever think that, let's just say, and we'll say that if Bret did business and meaning would have never left to go to WCW, and they would have been able to pay him what they wanted, maybe Vince McMahon would have revered him as the greatest of all time instead of Shawn Michaels.
Mm-hmm. I think there is some truth to that, although, and I can say this as someone who does have a pretty heavy Bret bias, I don't think Bret had the charisma to, I think there was a certain level of charisma that Bret didn't have. I liken it to 2 running backs. You have one running back that's going to run straight forward and run straight through you. Say, for example, first one thing, like a Jamal Lewis type.
Yeah.
He's not going to do a lot of fancy stuff. He's not going to dance around. He's going to try to run right through you. And then you have another running back in LaShawn McCoy who's going to make, the fancier juke moves and is going to do a little bit more from a highlight standpoint. I think that's sort of the dynamic I have with Bret and Shawn. I just don't know if Bret had the ability to do that, to go through the Attitude Era, because of the range that I think certain characters needed to get to. I think Shawn, for whatever reason, I think Shawn fit that mold a little bit better where they were trying to go. I enjoy both guys' library of matches. The only way I think I could put Shawn above that a little bit is I think because Shawn did it for longer, and you have sort of a better catalog. Like, I don't think we ever really saw Bret have the matches like Shawn had at WrestleMania 23 with Cena, or WrestleMania 25 with Taker, or even 26 with Taker. I think a lot of those matches, Shawn was very good at that babyface in peril emotion. And I just don't know if Bret had the range to do all the different emotional mannerisms like that Shawn did at WrestleMania 24, so to speak, with Flair. I enjoy both guys' content, the same. I think Shawn just has, for using music terms, Shawn just has a couple more albums on Bret, so to speak.
Yeah, I can agree, but I will say this though. When you think about the Attitude Era, right? Remember, Shawn was only there, what, 3 more months after Bret was gone, and we went heavy into Austin. I do think that the stories that Austin and Bret would have told would have been epic, because I think we would have got Austin versus Bret at WrestleMania 14, replacing Shawn Michaels. Let's not act like he wasn't a hothead. And I think that if Vince McMahon kind of had to depend on Shawn, so and like I said, obviously this is all like, our just thoughts and opinions. But I think if we would have went with Bret and Austin and then let Austin take off, the only thing is I don't know where Bret would have went, because obviously he wouldn't have went on the shelf for 4 years like Shawn Michaels did. But I gotta agree with you as far as the library. I do think one of the issues with Bret was he was kind of like, he wanted to beat everybody. A lot of people would say he's a mark for himself. Like I'm pretty sure you're a heavy Bret fan, so you've seen on the video where they got that YouTube, somebody put together a whole hour and stuff of people shooting on Bret Hart, and that's what the boys say. But like you, I've met him, and I'm fortunate to have him sign my Winged Eagle title. And I remember he was like, "Oh yeah, this is the Bret Hart belt." Is I heard they get the new belt. And this is right before The Rock introduced the belt that sort of closest to one they have now. It was the summer before that, but I just remember him being such a class act, and it's so unfortunate what's that happened to him, his family. And then you look like he's the last sole survivor of the Hart Foundation. That's another thing. It's like, especially because I'm just like, there's no reason Owen should have did that stunt. I also felt that they should have closed the show. Obviously, I wasn't the one making the call, but it's just like for him to have to go through that. It's just sad. I'm glad that him and Vince got to repair everything. Yes. Because you look at guys like, Vince never really got to repair things with Andre the Giant. So I'm looking at and I'm glad that it wasn't like an Ultimate Warrior situation where they repaired it and then he was gone. Like, fans got to get more Bret Hart, being able to see, even though he wasn't the same, I was one of the people that was actually happy to see him in the ring at WrestleMania 26 beating up Vince McMahon.
Yeah, I thought it was good for entertainment standpoint. I think the fan in me kind of saw that is Jordan on the Wizards, so to speak.
Okay.
He could still pull on the strings a little bit. I'm still going to remember Bret at WrestleMania 13 more than I will 26. But I do think that one thing that with Bret leaving the belt in Montreal, I do wonder how much, before that, how much of Alundra Blaze bringing that women's title to Nitro and dumping it in the trash can, I wonder how much of that weighed on the way that Vince decided to not let him leave with the belt. Because if Alundra did it, and how could you not have it in the back of your mind that Bret might do it? Now, I think, every one of us could sit back and be like, oh, well, it should have just been done this way or that way. But, if Vince is running out of money, he's already seen one of his belts get thrown in the trash on live television. Bret's going to a company that is hell-bent on putting him out of business. I think as I get older, as much as I don't agree with really the way either side handled it, I think, but I can understand both sides. Reading that Bret book, Shawn was not willing to put him over. I could definitely understand that frustration. And then from Vince's standpoint, your guy that's been there forever, who's been loyal to you, is leaving to go to a company that is trying to put you out of business and is trying to actively on a weekly basis give away your show or take other talent. Would be just enough doubt to make you act irrational as far as how you would normally handle it. It was a difficult time to where I think all parties involved wish they would have probably handled something differently. You know, with adding age and wisdom, I think sometimes you have that emotion.
Yeah, man, and you know, and it just sucked that he told him to go. You know what I mean? Because I just like Brett said, he didn't want to leave. You know, and that's why like he's just like I said, watching him growing up, watching him, he was always my favorite. Remember WrestleMania the arcade game?
Yes.
I would always have to win the title with him, and I wouldn't let nobody else win the title with anybody else. And if they did, I had to go back and do it. So, you know, and that's how, you know, for me, he was my favorite up until 2013, though, man. When Daniel Bryan came along, I listened to him on Chris Jericho's podcast, and it was when the moment he talked about when he first discovered professional wrestling and he went to Earl's videos and rented as much wrestling as he could. I don't know why that resonated with me so much.
Yeah.
But it was like that moment during that show, I said, this guy is relatable. That's something I would do. Like, you know, and from that moment on, like, I ain't gonna lie to you. WrestleMania 30, leading up to the show, my wife said, I hope Daniel Bryan, because the goal was to go to WrestleMania 30.
Okay.
Instead, I chose to get married. It was me and my wife. We had I was living in Connecticut. She was living here. Opportunity presented itself. She said, well, we can get married now, yada, yada. So I was like, well, I ain't going to WrestleMania. I'm going to get married.
Good move.
Yeah, man. So instead of what we did was we drove to Baltimore that weekend to watch wrestling. Well, we had to get some things from her house, her old apartment, but we drove here. I watched wrestle with my friends. So we went to this place called Loafers, and it was all my close friends. We went there and we watched WrestleMania together. And my wife said before we left, my mother was like, because she'll ask like now, she's like, who's the big match? Or who's in the big match tonight? Did your guy win? You know? And she said, she said, well, who's fighting? I said, well, Daniel Bryan. I said, he better win because I just hope they don't screw him over. And my wife said, I need Daniel Bryan to win because it's going to be a miserable drive back to Connecticut in the next couple of days. And when Batista tapped out, man, I'm not going to lie, I shed a tear. And he was the first person I ever shed a tear when they won, you know, because he's my guy. I think when he retired, I was dang near broken up as well.
Yeah, his retirement was tough because, you know, as you get older, you kind of understand that this is a very physical and grueling business, and it's not a business that lets a lot of people essentially walk out, you know, uninjured. It is something where a lot of the guys we grew up watching are dealing with the consequences of their time in the ring. And especially as we learn more about, you know, brain damages or brain injuries and concussions. And I don't like seeing guys hang on too long. I don't know. It could just be a me thing. It is a very selfish perspective of mine to where it really could mean the world to The Undertaker to be at Super Showdown or to be at WrestleMania 33. I personally, I'm not interested in seeing it. But, you know, I think everyone has their own, you know, everyone has their own biases when it comes to that. But to Daniel Bryan's point, when he left, I was thankful because it showed that WWE was trying to do something to prevent long-term injury to their performers. Now, I don't know or the medical history or what was really going on, but I found myself being grateful, one, that I got to enjoy his career, and then two, just, okay, cool, like that's a step in the right direction. WWE is taking care of their talent differently, because I think had that been in the Attitude Era, it would have just been like, oh, Daniel Bryan got his bell rung. He's got a really bad headache, but we're going to send him back out there, you know, the next night for SmackDown. And then that leads to longer term injury risk. So that was, yeah, his main event, the win at WrestleMania 30. That go through the indies, you see a guy like that grind through all the adversity and the difficult gimmicks that he was faced with, and he seemed to make everything work. And then to have the ability to reach the pinnacle that not a lot of guys his size or his background get to do, like to see how much that moment meant to him, I think was special to me too.
Yeah, it was, man, it was just amazing, you know. And I was Like you said, I'm with you as far as not wanting to see guys hang on too long. I think because one of the things I learned is that like I was never a big comic book fan. I'm probably one of the few wrestling fans that's not.
Hey, me and you both, man.
Wow. And the thing is, like, I hate to say it, but like when the actor who plays Batman or the actor who plays Superman dies, you can just write somebody else and make a new movie. But you know, and I think I've really noticed this with Macho Man was like our hero is gone. You know, here's a guy I watched grow up, and I remember my wife we was dating, and she called. She's like, I was like a little irritated, upset about it, and she was like, "What's wrong?" I said, "Macho Man." I said, "Oh, you just talking some guy you don't know." I'm like, "But no, like he was somebody," and this is one of those things where him and Vince seemed like they were starting to repair things, you know, and we missed out. Like you imagine how Macho Man would have been in the WWE right now, you know? Yeah, he would have looked different with the gray hair and the gray beard, but just the stuff that he could have contributed, you know? I love Macho Man as a commentator. I don't know how a lot of people did, but I loved it, you know, and just the stuff he could have did backstage, you know. That's why I'm happy Hogan is back, you know, and I want to see him involved more. I'm one of the people I read Hogan's book. So when the stuff came out about what he said, I wasn't mad because I'm like, this is before this guy changed his life around. And he was, you know, I know some people, they have their different beliefs. You know, I tend to share the same beliefs he did. So when I saw that he changed his life around, I know what that experience is like. So I was like, okay, that happened in the past, all good and fine. You know, all is well, that's fine, you know, but you know, like I said, seeing a guy like Daniel Bryan reach the pinnacle and you know, I was happy that he was able to come back. When he came back, I got a lot of text messages, people saying, man, you know what? Congratulations, your boy is back. You always believed. I said a lot of times I was just really hoping. I said, but to really see that, and when I got a chance to go to SmackDown Live when it was in Baltimore, and he wrestled Rusev because he ended up losing. And I remember sitting next to my buddy Corey, and Corey was at WrestleMania, so the moment wasn't as big for him as it was for me because this is after WrestleMania. Corey was like, "Man, it's so good to see Bryan back in the ring." I was like,
"Yeah, yeah." That was the good thing about seeing him come back. And my thing was, I just hope that it's no long-term injury risk with him. That's the big thing with me is that I'm glad he's back. I really like what he's doing with The Miz. If I'm not mistaken, he won at Super Showdown. So we're gonna get him and AJ, which is definitely a dream match. But you know, to your point about Savage, the thing with Savage was hard for me, and so were Piper and Dusty dying because it was twofold. Like these are pieces of our childhood. You know, these are like moments of our childhood that we're not going to be able to get again. And then not only that, like you know, Savage and Piper and Dusty, they're roughly about the same age as my own father.
Oh.
You know, like they're roughly in their 60s. So it's like, it kind of puts a different perspective to where like these guys are going. It's like, you know, it just, I don't know, for something about Piper and Dusty going as young as they did and so unexpected. It's like, you know, this is like, I have childhood memories. I have specific memories of watching these guys entertain me as a kid. And now they're no longer with us. It's just, yeah, those were difficult ones for me, if nothing else.
One of my early Dusty Rhodes memories, one of my first Dusty Rhodes memories was when he begged Dustin to allow him to be his partner.
Yes.
And, you know, that moment, you know, me being close with my dad as well, just seeing that was like, wow, that's like that moment where, you know, a father tells you, don't worry about these other people. I'm your friend. I got your back, you know. And it was just like, wow, you know, and it hit. I was working at ESPN at the time, and I was on the social media team because we rotate. Like when you're a production assistant, you rotate. And the social media team is by far my favorite. But one of the cool parts was that my lead producer is a wrestling fan. So he actually gifted me Daniel Bryan's book, which I still haven't finished reading yet. But you know, then like usually he's like, man, I'm gonna schedule one-on-ones for us just so we could talk wrestling on Tuesdays.
That's good. That's excellent.
I know, unfortunately, it never really happened just because the way my schedule was, but we definitely always found time to talk about it. But I remember when the news about Dusty came, it was right before I went to work, you know, and then people kept coming up to me saying, you know, we just had to explain to other people, like, no, the American Dream was a big deal. But then I remember being there when Piper died, you know, and when it happened, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I had to be the one to tweet it out for SportsCenter, you know, because we would tweet that, you know, this is around the time when it was right before they started doing their weekly shows, but it was around the time when they had just did their first WrestleMania highlight when Rollins cashed in.
Yes.
So this is, you know, what happened where it got a new guy who was overseeing SportsCenter. Ironically, his name was Glenn Jacobs. And, and you know, so I remember when I met with him, and somehow or another we brought it up. He's like, yeah, I'm a wrestling fan. I'm a big wrestling fan. I said, oh, yeah. He said, yeah. He said, we got Coachman, we got Robert Flores, and we got Todd Grissom. He said, I want to figure out a way we can do something wrestling related with those guys. I said, well, whatever it is, sign me up. Mm-hmm. You know, I said, I think it's really cool that you and Kane have the same name. He said, yeah, but he's a lot bigger than me.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so unfortunately, things you know, up there didn't, you know, they didn't keep things going. I remember when Coach had kind of hinted to me, because I was doing it was around that same summer, was getting ready for the MLB All-Star game, and the Royals had the most votes total of their players. Like, they had the most people voted at the time. So I asked Coach, can I do like an Instagram video with them? And he's like, sure. So we did that, and then I said, man, you know, it's an honor to work with you. I grew up watching. I'm a huge WWE fan. He said, oh yeah. He said, stay tuned. We got some stuff coming, you know. And same with Grissom. He was really cool. He was like, man, I had some really good times there, you know.
Yeah, I really enjoy watching. I don't know, something about seeing them on ESPN just makes me really proud as a wrestling fan, because you know, you do deal with that. Like, I think you alluded to it earlier, where you're talking about, you know, not wanting to tell everyone that you have like a wrestling podcast, and you find like a kindred spirit. It is interesting, like when wrestling becomes, you know, especially as an adult, like you find like-minded people that enjoy wrestling, or that either, you know, may have a podcast or may be interested in a certain era. Like, I find a lot of people were most interested in that Attitude Era, which is understandable. Like, a lot of the people around our similar age, there was so much exciting television, and it kind of went a different direction after WrestleMania 19, and a lot of people, you know, were not watching wrestling at 21 years old. They were too busy, like myself, probably going out to a bar and stuff like that to catch, you know, a 3-hour Monday Night Raw that wasn't nearly as entertaining. But it is kind of cool to see them on ESPN, to kind of have that mainstream acceptance, to where it's like, oh no, like this WWE thing that people, you know, may make fun of me about, no, it's on ESPN. Like, you can interact with guys who write for ESPN, their WWE team, and just to see that's really cool. It's just, it's a good feeling of legitimacy that I think it's good that wrestling has that in 2018.
Yeah, man. You know, and I think it was in 2012 2013, where I kind of just embraced it. I said, you know what? I'm gonna be the wrestling guy on campus, you know, and every day I would wear like a wrestling t-shirt to school, you know, and I think that kind of helped me. Like, when I went to ESPN, you know, that was a cool place where you find there was so many wrestling fans, especially, you know, everybody said, oh, you're up there now in Connecticut, you're closer to WWE, is that the next place? I was like, no, I don't want to work for them, just because I love it so much, I would never want to hate it, you know. Yeah. When I moved back to Baltimore, I didn't watch that much ESPN, because it was like, well, I don't have to anymore. But it was just a break, you know, and I said, I don't want to feel that way about wrestling, you know, but I think it's, you know, in this day and age, it is cool. And like you said, the Attitude Era definitely, you know, where you find a lot of people who just loved it. It's, oh yeah, I used to be a wrestling fan, you know, even ladies who you would think like, wait, you used to like wrestling? It's like, yeah, you know, they bring up The Rock or Austin.
Yeah, I always found people usually bring up either The Rock, Austin, DX, or Goldberg. Like, those were, in the NWO as well, like, those were like the main five that people would bring up that, you know, what did you watch as a kid? Oh man, I loved Austin, I loved The Rock. You know, the NWO was so cool with the Outsiders and all that. And I just wonder if this generation that we're watching now, and I've said this in multiple platforms, where I think this generation has the best in-ring wrestling, but it has the least interesting characters. And I don't think from a Punk Grammar standpoint that makes sense as far as least interesting characters, but I think you get my larger point, to where there's no real emotional investment in any of the characters other than what they had with Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30. But I think they're missing that the emotional connection with the fans, because I think now, you know, WWE is the brand. I don't think you go to a WWE show to see a specific wrestler the way you might have 20 years ago, where you wanted to go see Austin or The Rock. And I think that's one thing that I understand why it's missing in WWE. It's just one of the things I wish we'd go back to characters that you really understood who they were.
Yeah, you know, and again, it goes back to what we said earlier, where every story mattered. You know, and I think a guy like Kevin Owens, he was really good at making all his whatever he touches seems to be gold. Yes. You know, it's like you care about, okay, what is he going to do? You know, why is this important? You know,
yeah, I think Owens is a good one. I think Samoa Joe is another one who's pretty good as far as he seems to have a little bit more freedom. I'm not sure if it's by design or just kind of a happy accident, but you know, you kind of like you understand the depths and the human side to a Samoa Joe. It doesn't feel like it's overproduced, and I think that's one thing that WWE is kind of afflicted with right now, to where things might be a little overproduced, which I understand, because if you're going to be on ESPN and if you're going to be doing Susan Komen and Connor's Cure stuff, and you're going to be doing shows in like Saudi Arabia or Australia, you can't really have, you know, Sean Hunter in China, rest in peace, doing the old DX stuff. But I think there is room for sort of that freedom within the product that I think is missing nowadays.
Yeah, you cooking with grease tonight.
But I just think it's a little bit of the product that's missing right now.
Yeah, and you know what? Like we said about Samoa Joe, and he's that guy. I don't know. And I was talking to Dwayne about this. I was like, he brought up a good point. He said, man, I don't know if that AJ Styles Samoa Joe storyline was to go all this far. And I said, what you mean? He said, you think maybe the payoff was supposed to be at maybe Hell in a Cell, but they realized, like, wait, we got to keep this going.
Well, I think one thing that they're doing well with it is it feels real. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it feels like you feel like you have the heel coming after the champion. And I think one thing that Joe and Kevin Owens do a really good job of as a heel, and I think is missing now, to where they feel like their actions are justified.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think like Samoa Joe feels like what he's saying and doing is the right thing. And, you know, Kevin Owens is the same way. Like when he was doing his heel stuff with Shane McMahon or the McMahons, or, you know, even with Sami Zayn when they were against one another, like everything he does, he feels like he believes it 100%. It doesn't feel like it's a guy out there playing a recited script in his head from being a pro wrestler. I think that is one thing that's missing in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you hit that right on the head. And that's the thing what a heel does, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the art of being a heel. Like you got to feel like, no, what I'm doing is right. What you're doing is wrong. You know. Jinder was good at that at first.
Yeah, I really liked Jinder. I think they hit on the shock factor, because I didn't think he was going to get it from Randy that quick.
Right.
Which I think worked in the short term. I just think that
his title run may have been just a little too long.
It might have been just a little too long, and I think that the hard part of how with Jinder is that he started off with a lot of steam, and I just don't feel like it got better. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't feel like he kept ascending higher as being the champion. I think it's the old adage that Triple H used in the CM Punk DVD, where he was talking about the guy making the title making the guy. And I think at the end of it, I think the title was making the guy. And it kind of showed at the tail end of it. But I think Jinder showed that he can be that main event guy. And I still believe that he can. Him and Chad Gable are probably two of the guys on Raw that I'm most frustrated with, because I feel like they could be doing so much more with them.
Yeah. Exactly. It's funny you bring that up, because that's what Dwayne just posted on Wrestling Realms Instagram. He named 4 guys that he feel in his realness report. Him, Jinder, Bobby Roode. Who's the other 2 guys that he feels should be on SmackDown because they would be utilized better? You know.
I'd actually like to see Gable on 205 Live, just because Gable's a great wrestler. He doesn't have, I don't think he's hit his stride as a character yet. I also
okay, that makes sense.
I also don't know if they're really going to allow him to. But I think putting him on 205 Live is sort of a ex main roster guy that's been banished and, you know, stuff like that. I think it'll allow him to help find his voice. And I think he could put on excellent matches with guys like Cedric Alexander, Mustafa Ali, or, you know, Drew Gulak or Tony Nese or Buddy Murphy or guys like that. I think he could put on quality matches with them. And I think 205 Live is a lot more wrestling based as opposed to character. And I think Raw is the other way around, which I understand.
Right. And I think it made sense that they took they given us Lio Rush on Raw. I like that a lot.
Yeah, Lio Rush reminds me. I like what they're doing with the Lio Rush character, just because it's certain guys I think need hype men. I think Lashley is someone who definitely needs. Lashley, it feels weird being this judgmental. I just think that his character doesn't match the person on the microphone. Like he is the nickname. He is dominating, but he gets on the microphone and nothing about hearing him cut a promo adds to the character, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of sounds like a guy that you hear on the phone with a squeaky voice, and you see him in person. It's like, oh my God, that guy's big as a house. Like, those two things don't match up. And I think having a guy like Lio Rush to talk for Lashley, I think is going to help Lashley in the long term.
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to wrap this one up, man, because we've gone, you know, like I said, this really go about 45 minutes. I think we've hit roughly that or close to it. But I want to give you the floor to let people know where they can check out Wrestling Realm, all your channels, all your social media platforms, man. So the floor is yours. Let people know where, if they want to hear more from you, where they can hear it.
Yeah, so definitely I appreciate this opportunity and appreciate wrestling conversation is always great. Like you said, we could go on forever, especially when you can connect with somebody who just wants to talk, not so much and argue your points across or complain about the product, you know. So, you know, and that's the reason, you know, I really appreciate being here. But, you know, you can find me at Brian H. Waters on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, Brian H. Waters. Then Wrestling Realm is on same platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Podbean. So
cool, man. So you can check out all now 80 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast on iTunes or anywhere you get podcasts by searching Gully Blanchard. We're also on NoCoastBias.com. Shout out to Derek, who also lets me put up some of the writing that I do about wrestling. You guys can check that stuff out as well. I do a little bit of writing about the Sacramento Kings every now and again, thanks to Rafa and Jonathan for being the host of that site. It's through Fansided. It's called royalpain.com. Lastly, you can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, Gullyblanchard. This was episode 80 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. Brian, man, thank you very much for your time and coming on. We're going to have to do this again sometime soon. And yeah, man, let's have a good week. And I'll talk to you guys next week.
All right. Appreciate it, man.